Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Battle video. In this video we are going to discuss power creep and what is power creep, how does it happen, and essentially how does it affect units and what units are good against power creep, what units don't really suffer from power creep so much. So first we'll just discuss power creep. So power creep essentially is the constant increase in the level of power required to complete content or in the power of units that are coming out. So that means that a unit released last year June is essentially always guaranteed to be worse than a unit released this year June. Not always entirely in certain ways, but generally speaking they will just be statistically worse. An example of this can be looked at with the strength SS3 Vegeta. He was released in 2016 and received his awakening in 2017, and he has 90% attack and defense. When we look at the physical Vegeta, who was released in 2019 and 2018 and received his Dokkan awakening just recently in this last year, his passive is significantly better, featuring more attack and defense, a higher range of growth with attack and defense, additional abilities such as guarding, additional abilities such as damage reduction, and also a larger amount of stacking on his super attack. So you can see straight away that this Vegeta, the physical one, was designed for a better level of performance. Right off the bat, there is no different way to talk about it. The physical Vegeta even has a higher stat base. So a higher stat base, higher passive, released later on, and that is an example of how power creep is manufactured. Now it occurs for two reasons. So one is, like in MMO, perpetual PvE games require you to constantly have new challenges. Things like Dokkan events aren't really considered challenges, but things like LGEGT, SBR, Extreme SBR, the new Vegeta event, Epic Collection of Battles, also to a certain extent the God of Destruction events. All of these things require you to constantly have better units, and even within these events themselves, like Super Battle Road is a perfect example. If you compare the difficulty of the new category stages, or even like the last 20 category stages compared to the first 10 category stages or the first 10 mono stages, they are vastly more difficult, hitting a lot harder, and that is because they have taken power creep into account. The second most important note is summoning. Well, not the second most important, this is the most important reason, is summoning. People will always want to summon for something that is better. They very rarely want to summon for something that's worse. And if you horizontal plateau your units, you restrict yourself in terms of marketing and money making. It's very simple. It's the same with MMOs. People want to buy new expansions so they can feel more powerful and also have the sense of power progression. It's the same when summoning for units. People do love units for the character and for their aesthetics, but also the power of a unit is a large determining factor in whether people summon. They could bring out a General Tao that hits 28 million with every single attack stat, and people would probably summon to a certain extent. Of course, they'll make it a Super Saiyan Ultra Instinct Mega Mind Goku, but the point is that it's part of the reason, and a very big part of the reason, as to why power creep occurs. Now, let's talk about units that can circumvent power creep, or have a decent level of strength against power creep. So a factor that will determine whether a unit is strong against power creep is how niche and how strong they are defensively. It's why defense is such a big factor in things, but it's also part of the reason why units are evaluated. So for example, this SS3 Vegeta is as important for the Super Saiyan 3 SBR, which was released many years ago, as he is now in the ESBR. Yes, he's not the most important unit anymore, but having this unit makes it significantly easier, and it's because his passive is so simple yet so directly focused on him fulfilling that role. This Vegeta was designed to function in SBR and complete that level of challenge so well, to the point that he is still completely viable in ESBR and SBR that you can run him in to this day. Pure Saiyan's ESBR, this guy will still help you because his damage reduction is so high. Yes, he's not going to help you in any long form events, but he was never going to help you in long form events beforehand. his design is so radically simple that it essentially future-proofs him to some extent against the ever-creeping power progression. Compare him, for example, to a unit like the Super Saiyan Blue units. These units were for the anniversary. They were the 5th year anniversary units, and they are some of the best looking units in the game. Their attack animations are still some of the top tier animations, especially their active skills. These guys have not been future-proofed so well. They were designed to encounter the hardest event at the time, which was the legendary Goku event, and so their scaling has rapidly started to drop off almost immediately after the anniversary, which was quite startling. But they're not bad units. This isn't to say they're bad, but they're units that the way they're constructed, their lower levels of attack and defense, their lack of any other viability beyond their high levels of damage, kind of slowly begins to prevent them from functioning correctly. They don't have evasion unless they're in the 3rd slot. They don't have guard. They don't have damage reduction. Compare them to, for example, the 3rd year anniversary LRs, who, yes, at max level are possibly worse, but the simplicity of the 3rd year LRs makes them completely viable still to this day in a lot of content, because they start out with high defense. Yes, it's not really high enough anymore. It's starting to be eclipsed, but they're very, very good. A unit that I believe will be good future-proofed is something like Tech Gogeta. So Tech Gogeta's damage is under consideration. A lot of people consider it a bit too low. I think it's perfectly fine. But the amount of utility that Tech Gogeta provides is very, very good. The ability to heal, the ability to foresee super attacks, the ability to have damage reduction in both pre-transformation and post-transformation make him a very, very strong unit. That 30% damage reduction is high enough that if you have a couple dupes in this Gogeta, you're going to see him be able to tank relatively well across all forms of content. Now, of course, the foreseeing super attacks also helps out quite a bit. But compare how he'll handle high-level hardcore events once he transforms to the Strength Vegeta. Strength Vegeta is entirely offensive focused, but you can already find, especially at 55% or without a dupe, that once transformed, he's just taking too much damage from events. Yes, he'll dish out a lot of damage, but he's just far too high a risk to transform. At 55%, you're far more common to not transform your Vegeta than you are to transform it to clear the event. That is kind of where this whole situation lies. Another mechanic that definitely improves is guarding against all types. Guarding improves a unit simply because how big the type disadvantage factor is in damage calculations. Having a unit that is constantly type opposed to the enemy and provides them with that 1.5 factor reduction is a very, very powerful ability. Units with guard, generally speaking, survive quite long. I know Janemba, for example, is still being utilized out there to a certain extent simply through a combination of his evasion and guarding abilities. It is those simple type of things that really can aid in a unit. Another example is number of categories. So number of categories doesn't necessarily mean that every unit is future-proof, but if you look at units like Vegeta units, or you look at units like the AGL Kamehameha Gohan, a lot of these units have a lot of categories, and by having a lot of categories, you allow yourself the ability to be functional on a lot of teams, but also functional in a lot of slots on a lot of teams. This Teen Gohan slowly is starting to see his defensive abilities really drop off a little bit, especially in the shorter forms of content. However, he's very, very viable still as a floating unit to just fill up a slot on your team and not let you down. It's that kind of transition of units from main roster units to floating units or to sub units that allows you to utilize them, especially if they have a lot of categories. A unit that can fill in slots on multiple teams is still highly valuable. It's why I feel like a unit like Full Power Frieza is going to be a very, very good unit for a long time. His high levels of damage, coupled with his very good link set, coupled with his wide range of categories, and his active skill are going to make him and Goku very good. Not to mention their indefinite stacking, or their infinite stacking, I should say, and their long-lasting high levels of defense that they can start out with means that they are very, very powerful combinations, and I think they'll be very viable for a long time. But that's it about power creep, or the level of increase of power within the game. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like if you did. Otherwise, leave a comment if you have any queries about power creep down below. As always, that's going to be it from me, guys, so take care, stay safe, and bye.